Black Prince thought France was broken. Then, a peasant's son stepped into the Norman mud and forced history to bend. Bertrand du Guesclin stands over the Captal de Buch as England's finest captain drops to his knees in surrender. In the decisive clash of the Battle of Cocherel, 1364, du Guesclin feigned retreat at the Eure River bridge to extract brutal revenge for Poitiers in the 100 Years' War. In just 3 days, Charles V will be crowned at Reims. But this surrender is only the beginning of a larger reckoning. The shadow of Poitiers still hangs like an iron collar around the neck of France. In 1356, the Black Prince annihilated the royal host and dragged King John II into chains in London. The catastrophic disaster gutted the royal treasury, forcing the realm to pay ruinous ransoms for captive lords, while mercenary companies pillaged the countryside without mercy. When John II dies in an English palace, he leaves behind a broken kingdom, impoverished, defenseless, and paralyzed by 9 years of despair. With the king dead in chains and the treasury empty, the royal court is desperate. They do not need an arrogant aristocrat. They need a ruthless brawler who knows how to win dirty. Bertrand du Guesclin is an unpolished Breton squire, a peasant's son who clawed his way out of obscurity through savage woodland ambushes. Breaking centuries of feudal precedent, the royal court places high-born lords under this illiterate fighter to lead the realm's last army. Charles of Navarre moves 3,000 veteran mercenaries across Upper Normandy to choke Parisian trade and seize the Duchy of Burgundy. The frail young Dauphin Charles V faces a kingdom disintegrating from within before he can even claim his crown. A contemporary Norman chronicle records that rebel garrisons controlled every road to Paris, starving the royal capital of grain. Charles V needs an immediate, unquestioned military victory to legitimize a throne that Poitiers nearly destroyed. The royal council believes only a Grand Duke can command the king's men, but Charles V hands the realm's last army to a common soldier. Du Guesclin marches rapidly toward the River Eure, tasked with clearing the strategic corridor holding Paris hostage. A low-born outsider receives the kingdom's first real opportunity for vengeance. The entire future of the Valois dynasty rests upon his unorthodox methods, yet he marches directly toward an enemy holding an unassailable defensive ridge. It is a death trap. Entrenched on the wooded crest of the Bois de Cocherel, the Anglo-Navarrese host holds an unassailable ridge behind deadly longbow wedges. 2 days of scorching standoff beneath the summer sun exhaust the French army's meager supplies. Du Guesclin refuses to mount a suicidal uphill charge. Instead, he orders a staged, panicked retreat eastward across the stone bridge over the River Eure. If his men panic during the crossing, the French army faces total annihilation. The sight of retreating baggage carts proves irresistible to the Anglo-Navarrese high command atop the hill. The Captal de Buch watches the French lines dissolve and assumes the low-born commander is fleeing the field in disgrace. Tactical discipline evaporates in an instant. Believing an easy slaughter awaits them on the plain, the enemy captains abandon their fortified high ground, surging down the grassy slope to cut down what they believe is a routed, broken army. The retreating French columns halt instantly at the sharp blare of royal war horns. In unified discipline, the knights wheel about, lower their shortened 5-foot pikes, and lock their shields into an impenetrable iron wall. This is the tactical answer to the nightmare of Poitiers. Instead of mounting an arrogant cavalry charge, French men-at-arms stand shoulder to shoulder on foot, creating a solid barrier of steel that absorbs the charging enemy shockwave on the valley floor. The enemy charge slams into the French shield wall with the deafening roar of shattering ashwood and crumpling plate armor. The valley floor becomes a suffocating cauldron of dust and iron, the earth turning slick with blood beneath hundreds of trampling boots. Steel blades hack into mail as men grapple hand-to-hand under the blazing sun. For the first time in a decade, the French battle line bends under pressure, but absolutely refuses to break. Du Guesclin raises his sword and drops the second jaw of the trap. Guillaume Boitel leads 60 concealed Breton cavalry bursting from the oak woods, striking the exposed enemy rear with crushing momentum. The Chronicle of Jean Froissart records that the sudden thunder of hooves shattered the enemy's resolve in a single blow. Pinned between the immovable shield wall and couch lances, the Anglo-Navarrese host fractures beyond repair as their desperate captains realize they are encircled. The elite Anglo-Navarrese host shatters across the blood-stained floodplain of the River Eure. The Captal de Buch watches his banner fall into the dirt as his veteran mercenaries throw down their weapons and flee toward the timber. Within 2 hours of first contact, the most formidable mercenary army in the 100 Years' War ceases to exist. The long-standing myth of English battlefield invincibility lies utterly destroyed among the heaps of fallen armor on the open field. A quiet hush descends over the Eure Valley as the dust slowly settles over hundreds of fallen combatants. Where France had known only catastrophic routes, humiliation, and royal despair, an impossible victory now stands verified by the sword. A peasant's son, dismissed by high-born nobility as an unrefined brawler, has outmaneuvered the premier captains of Western Europe. The balance of military power in medieval France has shifted irrevocably in a single afternoon. 30 French knights encircle the Captal de Buch in the Norman mud, knocking him from his warhorse and stripping his daggers. The legendary Gascon commander, hero of Poitiers and master of English arms, yields his blade to Du Guesclin's common soldiers. Bound and disarmed, he looks up at the rough Breton squire who engineered his downfall. The most dangerous commander in Edward III's coalition is now a helpless captive of the French crown. The French crown turns knightly pride into cold, hard cash. They lock the capital in a high tower until England and Navarre pay a mountain of gold for his life. The humiliation of royal captivity is no longer borne by France alone. By pricing the Black Prince's finest commander in raw coin, the young Valois monarchy proves to all of Europe that the days of unchecked English supremacy are over. 3 days after the slaughter on the River Eure, galloping royal messengers bring word of the victory to Reims Cathedral. A French royal chronicle records that tears filled the eyes of the court as sacred oil touched the forehead of King Charles V. The agonizing wound of Poitiers is healed not with hollow treaties, but with sovereign strength. The young king takes his throne, backed by military triumph, but the broader war still rages. The victory at Cocherel breaks Charles of Navarre's grip on northern France, forcing the surrender of his strategic castles along the Seine. In the sweeping theater of the 100 Years' War, France ceases cowering behind defensive city walls. For the first time since the catastrophe at Poitiers, the French crown seizes the strategic initiative, dictating terms across Normandy and reclaiming lost provinces. The tide of English conquest has finally collided with an immovable wall. The high nobility once mocked Du Guesclin as an uncouth outsider, but now they bow before his tactical brilliance. Charles V grants the Breton fighter the Countship of Longueville, eventually elevating him to Constable of France to direct all royal armies. The peasant's son has achieved total revenge against the system that once dismissed him. Through calculated attrition and iron discipline, Du Guesclin becomes the master architect of France's long and grueling reconquest. Can Bertrand du Guesclin maintain this unbroken string of victories when he marches into the brutal meat grinder of the Battle of Eure? 4 months after Cocherel, the Breton commander faces veteran Anglo-Breton longbowmen in a ferocious showdown for control of the Western Duchy. Without the advantage of terrain deception, his tactical formulas will be pushed to their absolute breaking point. The war's ultimate test of strength is already rushing toward him on open ground. The triumph on the River Eure proved that calculated discipline could dismantle England's lethal missile power, turning 9 years of despair into resurgent national triumph. It transformed French warfare from reckless chivalric suicide into a deadly science of attritional defense. Du Guesclin restored the military honor of France before spending the next decade dismantling English territorial rule. The next collision would come at the Battle of Eure, where Du Guesclin faced complete capture on the field. They said France was finished after Poitiers, But one forgotten river clash reversed a decade of ruin before the war exploded at the Battle of Eure. Subscribe to stay with this series. The next engagement is already in production. If you are watching on a television screen, the QR code on screen now will take you directly to the subscribe button on your phone.